I've received multiple requests for Christmas series reviews over the years. Most of the time people would request the Silent Night Deadly Night series or Die Hard, but occasionally I would be asked to review the 2 Black Christmas movies, to which I would always say no because I felt that there weren't enough films in the series to call it a proper series. But now we have 3 of them, I thought, why not? The series is actually unlike any other series I've ever reviewed in that, despite there being 3 films, none of them are a sequel. In fact, the other 2 are both remakes, although the 2019 is an incredibly loose remake that only really shares the title in common. So let's go back to the first film and see if it really needed 2 remakes. My money's on no. 1974's Black Christmas, directed by Bob Clark, is a film that I've wanted to watch for a long time, so getting to watch it recently was a real treat. It's widely considered to be one of the first slasher movies ever made, and its influence on the genre is very clear. It definitely feels like the middle point between Psycho and Halloween, introducing some of the slasher tropes while still feeling kind of classy and more psychological. Inspired by the urban legend The Babysitter and The Man Upstairs, as well as a series of murders that took place in the Westmount neighborhood in Montreal, the film was shot on a relatively small budget of $620,000, which after adjusting for inflation equates to just over $3 million now. Most of the film is set inside a sorority house. The group of girls who live in the house have been receiving repeated calls from an unknown caller who keeps swearing and making pig noises. Slowly the girls in the house start to be picked off, leading the others to believe they've gone missing. When they report this to the police try to track the calls down and work out who the killer is. The story isn't very complex, as you would probably expect for a slasher, but for its time it was incredibly original. Although it's easy to look at the film as following a basic slasher formula, for its time that formula didn't really exist at all. But what I think sets this apart from other slasher movies like the Friday the 13th films or even the 2006 remake is that the film is much more psychological and focuses more on the mystery element. There's a great moody murder mystery element to the film that I think makes it really stand apart. The original script was supposedly incredibly graphic, however Bob Clark made the conscious decision to tone it down, thinking it would make the film much more effective. This is something that I definitely do appreciate, although I love a bit of violence and gore. Sometimes if it's more psychological and you don't actually see anything, it can make the film a lot more unnerving and creepy. It reminds me a lot of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, in which that had almost no gore, which leads you as the audience to basically create the image in your head, adding a much more unnerving quality. Visually, I think the film is fantastic. I love the usage of very dark color grading, which in some ways looks like it's lit up by Christmas lights and fireplaces. This is actually something that the 2 remakes captured really well, surprisingly. It's nice to see that they really knew how to make the film look and didn't skimp out on the lighting or anything like that. It helps add this very dark, Christmassy look to the film that is somehow warm yet cold simultaneously. As well as this, I think the cinematography is fantastic. There are multiple POV shots of the killer that, although do just look like the killer is just holding the camera with one hand, I think adds extra tension to the film, especially in the moments where you're inside the body of the killer as he looks at the girls from a distance. I think it's really creepy. I also found the phone calls incredibly unnerving, especially whenever you hear the killer murdering someone over the phone and making pig noises at the same time. Those moments genuinely really got under my skin and made me feel really uncomfortable. The killer is incredibly elusive and creepy, and I think the idea of never explaining his backstory and keeping him a mystery makes him even more terrifying. Something that they completely fuck up on the 2006 remake. The acting is pretty decent for the most part. I wouldn't say anyone does an incredible job, but I do enjoy a lot of the characters and performances. Olivia Hussey is a great final girl, and although the character made some incredibly dumb decisions, I do like her quite a lot and I think she does a good performance. Keir Delay, aka David Bowman in 2001: A Space Odyssey, is really good and plays an incredibly high-strung and weird character. I do think he could have been developed a bit more, but I did like him for the small amount he was in the film. John Saxon is also pretty great as the police chief. It's interesting to see that Wes Craven basically had him play the exact same character again in Nightmare on Elm Street. However, I don't think Mrs. Mack, the sorority house mother, needed to be in the film at all. Her short subplot seemed really pointless and it just padded out the film. But to be honest, that's really the only big thing I don't like about the film. I thought Black Christmas delivered a lot of really great scares and its ending was incredibly well done, adding this creepily ambiguous edge to the film. Its influence on horror movies and the slasher genre generally is pretty huge, and watching it now, having seen so many more recent slasher movies, it's incredible to see how many tropes it basically either invented or helped develop. It's not one of the best slashers I've ever seen, but definitely a lot better than many of the earlier slasher films. Many of them feel like cheap exploitation, whereas this film is genuine and incredibly creepy at points. This is also definitely Bob Clark's best film, which, considering how much I enjoy A Christmas Story, definitely says a lot, although I don't think he's really done anything good after that. I mean, I wouldn't say that the Baby Geniuses movies are like top tier filmmaking at all. This film is honestly one of the best Christmas horror movies I've ever seen, and I highly recommend it. I'm going to give this one an 8 out of 10. Throughout the mid to late 2000s, basically every single 70s and 80s horror movie saw remakes. It was a very dark time in horror, and I'm super glad that that era is now dead and we have talented directors like Ari Aster and Robert Eggers making incredible genre films. Black Christmas was remade in 2006, written and directed by Final Destination co-writer Glenn Morgan and released by Dimension Films. The production was very troubled and there was a lot of studio interference. The Weinstein brothers apparently heavily disputed with Morgan with how the film should end, as well as the film's general tone. This led to there being 3 different cuts of the film existing: a European cut, an American cut, and an extended unrated cut, which is the version that I watched. Considering the overwhelmingly negative reception, I went into the film expecting to probably have a miserable time, but instead I had an absolute blast for all the wrong reasons. This film is really bad, but my god, is it hilarious. It really reminds me of the Final Destination films or even the Saw films and just how over the top and ridiculous they are. But unlike those films that are incredibly self-aware and understand that they're pretty dumb, the film feels like it's genuinely trying to be serious and dark, and I think that actually makes the film even more funny. The film features the basic story of the original film. A group of girls live in a sorority house together, and on Christmas Eve the girls start being killed off one by one. But there's a lot more going on plot wise. They get super complicated and kind of ridiculous. The killer, Billy, was born with severe jaundice and was abused by his mother for being yellow. His mother murders Billy's father with the help of her lover. Because her boyfriend is impotent, she rapes Billy and impregnates herself with his child. 8 years later, he disfigures his daughter by gouging out her eye and then brutally murders his mother and her lover. He then makes cookies out of her flesh and is sent to a mental asylum shortly after. 15 years later, him and his daughter team up to kill the people who live in the sorority house because it used to be his former home. There's also this weird subplot about a girl discovering her boyfriend made a sex tape with one of the other girls in the house. Also, one of the girls comes to find her half-sister who lives there but goes missing. There's all this random stuff going on and it makes everything just this huge mess, which is a shame because I do actually think that the backstory of Billy could have been really great if executed well. On paper, I think that backstory has a lot of potential and is pretty unnerving and creepy, but in execution it is so ridiculous. The way the film cuts back and forth between the modern day stuff and flashbacks is also executed really badly, and it never really feels like either of the stories are developed well. It also gets constantly confusing as to what is happening and when the scenes are set. The idea of having these two killers working together also gets super confusing because it takes a long time for them to reveal who is who. I just thought that at some points they forgot to turn up the yellow. To create the jaundice effect, it also looks very much like instead of painting the character yellow, they just upped the yellow in post or sometimes added it with CGI. It gets really confusing because there's multiple times where shots are just bright yellow and normal characters also look like they have jaundice. It's pretty hilarious. In terms of the violence and gore, it's really well executed, but some of the deaths are really stupid. The acting in the film is incredibly bad, and even Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who normally does great performances, looks like she doesn't want to be there. In fact, I don't think anyone really wanted to be there at all. It does really just feel like a studio product that no one really had any passion towards. But although I do think this film is really terrible, I highly recommend it because it's just so unbelievably ridiculous. It's definitely the sort of film that I think if you watched with a group of friends would be so much more entertaining. In terms of modern slasher movies, you could do a lot worse. Although the film is bad, at least it's fun to watch. I had a great time watching it, and although I'll most likely never watch it again, I'm glad I checked it out. I do understand why it has this weird, slowly rising cult following, even if the enjoyment I got from it was completely ironic. But it's still a pretty hilarious mess of a film that is an absolute blast to watch. I'm going to give the 2006 remake of Black Christmas a 3 out of 10. And that brings us to the most recent remake from 2019. I went into this film not sure what to expect. Although IMDb's rating was incredibly low, I had actually heard quite mixed things about the film. People did actually seem to like it as well as dislike it. Little did I know just how unbelievably terrible this film actually is. Unlike the 2006 remake that does borrow a lot of the story beats, there is almost nothing in here that's taken from the original movie. Apart from the fact it's set in a sorority house and someone finds a corpse in a chair in the attic, the only thing it shares in common with the original movie is its title. This wouldn't be a big problem, I guess, if the film was good. I would have been happy to see him do something different, but this film is a tiresome, painful mess. The film follows a group of girls who live in a sorority house together. One of them, Riley, played by Imogen Poots, is trying to move on from being raped by the president of one of the fraternities. The girls start to draw the ire of the fraternity DKO after a successful petition to get a bust of the university's founder removed from the main building, as well as a petition to get Carrie Ells fired for not teaching books written by women. The girls take part in a talent show in which they perform a song blasting the rape culture at the fraternity. This leads to the girls receiving threatening DMs, as well as a couple of the girls going missing. Shortly after, their fraternity house is attacked by a group of masked men who have come from that fraternity. So they all have to team up with a bunch of other women as well to stop the fraternity, who are using black magic to hypnotize other guys to join their frat. I'm not going to say that this film is completely unredeemable. There are actually some things about the film that are somewhat decent, and other things that are well-natured even if they completely fall flat on their face. I find the feminist angle of the film incredibly hit or miss, much more miss than hit though. Sometimes it does work really well, delivering great statements about abuse and sexual assault, as well as subverting the sexualization of women in slasher movies. I don't think it works all the time, and there are multiple points where it feels quite heavy-handed, but it's not terrible, and I understand the intention, and I think they could have really done something really great here, but they just don't. In the first 20 minutes, the film hammers you with some of the cringiest feminist statements that I've ever seen in a film. It's the kind of feminism where instead of fighting for equality, it just completely talks down to men and treats them like shit. And while, yeah, men are pretty shit and kind of deserve that, the biased nature of this angle feels really pandering. There's one guy in the film that is good, and it just feels so tacked on and unnecessary. The characters are terribly written and sometimes cartoonish. The whole idea of a secret cult practicing black magic is super ridiculous and creates such a weird film tonally. The film seems stuck between having this important message told in an incredibly serious way or just being ridiculous horror schlock, and sadly it doesn't really do either well at all. Because the film was a PG-13, there is basically no blood or gore whatsoever, so the film doesn't even have that going for it. The majority of the film is made up of badly done kills and weird fight sequences. Although the film was always intended to be a PG-13, which it is, it's edited in this really weird way where it looks like they've cut out any shot of blood. It's super disorienting. But something that I actually really do like about the film is that its cinematography is quite creative. It has this great Tarantino pulpy quality to it that I really love. There are multiple shots that I like and multiple hard zooms that are so cheesy but really fit the tone of the scenes that they're in well for the most part. There are also times where it happens and it doesn't fit the tone whatsoever. The first time it happened, I couldn't stop laughing because it was just completely out of nowhere and didn't fit at all. There's one time early on in the film where they do a hard zoom and it is literally just a complete rip-off of the scene in The Exorcist 3, like the really famous jump scare. Like the timing and everything, the way it's shot and set up, it's literally the exact same scene as that. Up until like the third act, the cinematography is super basic, but then it just kind of goes insane, and although it took me off guard at first, once it actually starts fitting the new tone of the film, I think it works really well. But that's about all I can say in terms of positives. Imogen Poots is not bad in the film, but she's the only one who seems to care in the slightest, and even then I don't think she cared that much. No one else seems to want to be there, and every other performance is really terrible. The 2019 remake of Black Christmas is an absolute mess. It's terribly written, acted, and tonally all over the place. Apart from some creative camera work, there's nothing here I would say is worthwhile in any way, and even then similar camera work can be seen in a whole myriad of different movies done much better. Like I would recommend watching Kill Bill or something over this. Its feminist angle was incredibly pandering and heavy-handed, and it takes what would have been a pretty boring and dumb horror movie and it made it just this incredibly cringy experience. I'm going to give it a 1 out of 10. And that was the Black Christmas trilogy. Overall, apart from the third film, this isn't the worst set of films I've ever seen. I would highly recommend the original as it is a slasher classic and one of the most influential horror movies of all time. And I would probably recommend the 2006 one if you're into ridiculous over-the-top slashers, but I wouldn't recommend the 2019 film at all. Let me know what you think of the films in the comments below. I'm looking forward to see what people say. I hope you have a good Christmas and enjoy the rest of your year, even if you can't enjoy it the same way you would normally. Please stay safe and keep those around you safe also. 2021 will hopefully be a much better year for everyone, and I hope to carry on getting series reviews out every few months like I did in the second half of 2020. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in the new year.